The day my grandmother's estate lawyer called to schedule the reading of her will, my cousin Adrian already knew how everything was going to go. He told me as much, standing in the driveway of her house in Kelowna 3 days after the funeral, hands in his pockets, not quite looking at me. "She always said the lake property would stay in the family," he said. "The real family. The ones who built something." I didn't respond. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with Adrian was like trying to explain color to someone who had decided they preferred the dark. My grandmother, Rosalind, passed away in February at 81 years old. She had lived in that same house on the edge of Okanagan Lake for nearly 40 years. She raised 2 children there, my mother and my uncle Douglas. My mother died when I was 11. After that, my grandmother raised me too. I am 34 years old. I have been a registered nurse for 9 years. I work long shifts at a hospital in Kelowna, the same city where my grandmother spent her final years. That is not a coincidence. When she was first diagnosed with congestive heart failure 6 years ago, I was the one who drove her to every cardiology appointment at Kelowna General. I was the one who reviewed her medication schedule, called her pharmacy when something needed adjusting, and stayed overnight on the couch in her living room during the worst weeks when her oxygen levels kept dropping. I was the one who organized her home care when she could no longer manage the stairs alone, and I was the one who held her hand during the nights she was afraid. Adrian, meanwhile, had built a commercial real estate business in Calgary. He visited twice a year, sometimes once. He sent flowers on her birthday and called on Sundays when it was convenient. Nobody in the family ever said out loud that this was a problem. That was not how things worked in our family. What people said out loud was how impressive Adrian was, how driven, how much he reminded everyone of my grandfather. His name came up at every holiday dinner the way a familiar song does, reliably, comfortably, without anyone really choosing it. My name came up too sometimes, usually attached to the word helpful. I had stopped expecting more than that by the time my grandmother got sick, and then I stopped expecting it entirely, because I was too busy to think about it. There were medications to track, and appointments to keep, and nights when I sat beside her bed, listening to her breathing, counting the seconds between each exhale, the way you do when you love someone and you know that time is running out. She died on a Tuesday morning in early February. The ground outside was frozen solid, and the lake was the color of pewter. I had been at the hospital for a 12-hour shift and came directly to her house afterward because her home care worker had called me the night before, worried. I was there when she passed. Adrian was in Calgary. He arrived 2 days later for the funeral arrangements. By then, I had already contacted the funeral home, notified her friends, and sorted through the paperwork in her filing cabinet so that her lawyer would have everything needed. Adrian thanked me for handling things and then immediately started talking about the lake property. The property had been in the family since my grandfather built the original cabin in the late 70s. Over the decades, Rosalind had expanded it into a proper 4-season home. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a dock that needed replacing every few years. The land alone was worth considerably more now than it had been then. Kelowna Real Estate had done what Kelowna Real Estate had been doing for years. Adrian had mentioned the property at least once every visit for the past 4 years. He had ideas about it. Development potential, a revenue stream. He talked about it the way he talked about everything, with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told he was wrong about something that mattered. I had never said anything about what I wanted. That was not something that had ever felt available to me. The will reading was scheduled for the second Friday in March. My grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Gould, had a small office in downtown Kelowna, with framed prints of the lake on every wall. There were 8 of us in the room: Adrian, his wife Tessa, my uncle Douglas, and his wife Linda, 2 cousins from my grandmother's side who lived in the Okanagan, and who I had not seen in years, and me. Mr. Gould was a quiet, methodical man in his 60s, with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He arranged his papers slowly and deliberately, and the room was very still while he did it. He began with the smaller bequests: jewelry to specific family members, a donation to the Kelowna Hospice Society, a few $1,000s to a friend she had known since her 30s. The two cousins received modest gifts and seemed genuinely moved. Adrian sat with his arms crossed and his jaw set, waiting. Then Mr. Gould reached the main portion of the estate. The investment accounts and liquid assets totaling approximately $240,000 are to be divided equally between Douglas Mercer and the estate of Catherine Mercer. That was my mother, with Catherine's share passing to her daughter. That was me. Roughly half of that amount was coming to me. I felt something shift in my chest. I had not been expecting that. Adrian uncrossed his arms. Mr. Gould continued. The Kelowna residential property, including all furnishings and contents, is to pass to Adrian Facer. Adrian exhaled slowly, like a man who had been holding his breath for months. He glanced at Tessa. She touched his arm. Then Mr. Gould turned a page. The Okanagan Lake waterfront property, the cabin parcel, and all associated land rights are to pass entirely to my granddaughter. The room went very quiet. Adrian turned to look at me. His expression went through several things in quick succession: confusion, disbelief, and then something colder. That's the wrong order, he said. Mr. Gould looked up. I beg your pardon. The lake property. You read it after the house, I assumed. Adrian stopped. He regrouped. That property has been in our family for generations. It was always understood that it would go to someone who would actually use it for the family. Keep it intact. Mr. Gould looked at him calmly. The document is clear, Mr. Mercer. Adrian looked at me. Something in his face had shifted entirely now. The courtesy stripped away. You lived 10 minutes from her. You were over there all the time anyway. The house makes more sense for you. You could actually use it. He was reframing it in real time, trying to make it sound reasonable, but the edge underneath was unmistakable. You barely knew what to do with a property like that, he continued. He said it lightly, like an observation. I have the background to develop it properly, to actually maximize what it could be worth. Nan would have wanted it to grow, not just sit there. A few people in the room looked at the floor. I said nothing. I had spent enough years being the one who said nothing that it came naturally. And then Adrian leaned back and said the thing that made the room go completely still. Honestly, all those years running over there. Was that not enough payment for you already? Nobody spoke. Tessa looked at her hands. My Uncle Douglas made a sound like he had started to say something and then changed his mind. I felt the words land somewhere behind my sternum. Not because they surprised me. Because they didn't. Mr. Gould set down his pen. He took off his reading glasses. He folded them carefully and placed them on the table in front of him. There is one additional matter, he said, that your grandmother specifically requested. I address after the primary distribution was announced. Adrian said nothing this time. Mr. Gould reached into his leather briefcase and removed a second envelope. It was smaller than the legal folder, cream-colored, with my grandmother's handwriting on the front. She had written my name on it. Just my first name, in her careful, looping script. Rosalind prepared this letter approximately 8 months ago, Mr. Gould said. She asked that I read it aloud to the family at this time. He unfolded the pages slowly. The paper made a soft sound in the quiet room. To my family, he began. If you are hearing this, then I have gone somewhere I could not take any of you with me. I hope it was peaceful. It was, if things went the way I planned. Before anyone starts calculating what they received and what they feel they deserved, I want to say some things clearly, because I will not be there to say them myself, and I have never been very good at saying them in person anyway. Adrian, you have built a good life, and I am proud of you. You have your grandfather's drive and his confidence, and those are real gifts. The house is yours because I want you to have a place that connects you to this family, to this city, to me. I hope you use it that way. But I need to be honest about something I have observed over the past several years. Building things and tending to things are not the same skill. I have watched you build with great energy and focus. I have also watched you be absent for most of the things that required tending. I am not angry with you. I understand that your life is in Calgary and that distance is real. But I want you to understand something before you leave this room, because I think you have spent a long time believing a story about this family that is not entirely accurate. Mr. Gould turned the page. The room had not moved. 6 years ago, when my heart started failing in the ways hearts eventually do, I was frightened. Not of dying. I had made a kind of peace with that, but of the in-between. Of the part that comes before, when you need help and you do not know how to ask for it, and you are not entirely sure who will answer. My granddaughter answered. Every time, she rearranged her schedule around my appointments. She learned my medications better than I knew them myself. She sat with me in waiting rooms and did not check her phone. She stayed overnight when I asked her to, and she stayed overnight when I did not ask, because she could tell when I needed her to be there. She never once made me feel like a burden. That is harder to do than it sounds. I know, because I watched the expressions of everyone else who came to visit, that careful look people get when they are trying to remember how long they have already been there. She never had that look. I want you all to know what those years cost her. She gave up a relationship in her late 20s because she could not commit to someone who lived in Vancouver when she needed to stay near me. She missed a promotion opportunity at the hospital because she reduced her hours during the worst months. She spent money on gas and groceries and incidentals for my house that she never once mentioned, and certainly never asked me to repay. I found the receipts in her car by accident one afternoon. She was mortified. I was not. I did not tell her what I was planning, partly because she would have argued with me about it, partly because I wanted it to be the last real thing I could give her, not just money or land, but the feeling of being truly seen. I hope it lands that way. My throat had closed entirely by this point. I was staring at the table because looking up felt impossible. Mr. Gould continued. The lake property is hers because she understands what it means to take care of something you love even when no one is watching. She took care of me that way. I trust her to take care of that land the same way. There is one more thing I want to say, and I am going to say it plainly, because I no longer have time for anything else. The people who show up are not doing it for the inheritance. That is precisely why they deserve one. Mr. Gould refolded the letter. He set it on the table in front of me. Nobody looked at Adrian. I picked up the letter with both hands because I did not trust myself to hold it with one. I could feel the weight of the paper, the specific texture of it. She had used the good stationery, the kind she kept in the drawer in her writing desk, the one I had dusted around 100 times without ever opening. After a moment, my Uncle Douglas cleared his throat. He looked at me, and his eyes were red. She talked about you all the time, he said quietly. I don't think I told you that enough. I could not answer him. I just nodded. We stood to leave shortly after. Mr. Gould shook my hand and pressed the envelope into it. He said something brief and kind about my grandmother that I did not fully hear. Adrian was still in his chair when I put on my coat. His wife had her hand on his arm and was speaking quietly to him. He was not responding. He was looking at the wall of lake prints, at nothing in particular, with the expression of someone who had understood something too late to do anything about it. I did not say anything to him. There was nothing I needed to say. My grandmother had said everything, in her careful looping handwriting, 8 months before she left. Outside, the March air was cold and clean, and the mountains across the lake were still snow-capped against a flat white sky. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment before getting into my car. I thought about the dock at the lake property, the boards that needed replacing on the south end, the way the light came off the water in the early morning in July, that particular pale gold, that my grandmother always said she never got tired of seeing. The summer I was 13 and she taught me to fish off that dock, both of us in rubber boots, neither of us catching anything, both of us perfectly content. I thought about all the things she had seen, all the things she had quietly noted and quietly kept and quietly decided. I got into my car and sat for a long moment before starting the engine. She had always known. That was the thing I kept coming back to. Through all of it. The appointments, the overnight stays, the receipts in my glove compartment. The years of showing up without being asked. She had seen every single bit of it. She had just waited until she could make sure I knew. I drove home through the city she had loved for 40 years, through streets I had driven 1,000 times to get to her, and I let myself cry the whole way. Not because of what she left me, because of what she had written in that letter, in her careful hand, on her good stationery. The simple, devastating fact that someone had been paying attention all along.